The transaction took 11 seconds. Ronnie's fingers moved across the keyboard the way they had moved 10,000 times before. Steady, practiced, unhurried. The customer on the other side of the counter was checking his phone and not paying attention. The colleague 2 stations to her left was eating a sandwich and talking about the weekend. The branch manager was in his office with the blinds half closed, working through a stack of papers that had nothing to do with anything happening on the floor. 11 seconds, a small number, a small adjustment, money that moved so quietly through the system that it barely left a ripple. Ronnie sat back slightly, kept her face completely neutral, and waited. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 20. No alert, no phone ringing, no one appearing at her shoulder, nothing. She exhaled slowly through her nose, looked up at the next customer approaching the counter, and smiled the same gentle smile that had made her the most trusted teller in the branch for 7 consecutive years. And somewhere behind that smile a door opened, a door that, once opened, she would spend the next several years trying to walk back through, and failing. This is the true story of Ronnie, the bank teller who became a thief from the inside, the woman nobody suspected because she was exactly the person everyone trusted. Subscribe right now if you're new here, because this story goes to places you will not see coming. To understand how Ronnie got to that moment, fingers on a keyboard, moving money that wasn't hers, heart rate barely elevated, you have to understand who she appeared to be, because appearance in this story is everything. Ronnie was the kind of employee that branch managers put in their prayers. She arrived early, not 5 minutes early, genuinely early, before the lights were fully on, before the coffee had finished brewing. She organized her station with a precision that looked almost personal, like a craftsperson arranging tools before a long day of careful work. She greeted customers by name when she knew them, and made strangers feel like regulars within 60 seconds. Her colleagues respected her, her managers trusted her. Customers would bypass shorter queues to wait for her window specifically, because there was something about the way Ronnie handled people that felt different, unhurried, attentive, like you and your transaction were the only thing in her world right now. For years, she worked the counter handling hundreds of transactions every single day. Deposits, withdrawals, credit card payments, account adjustments, the full, repetitive, unglamorous machinery of retail banking, and she handled all of it with the same quiet professionalism that had defined her from day one. But while everyone around her saw a dedicated employee doing her job, Ronnie was doing something else entirely at the same time. She was studying. Hit that like button if you already feel where this is going, because the most dangerous person in any system is not the one who hacks it from the outside. It's the one who learns it from the inside. Day after day, month after month, Ronnie watched how money moved. Not casually, carefully. The way a student watches a teacher, identifying patterns, noting sequences, filing away information that most people in her position would never bother to retain. She saw how credit card transactions were processed, and at what point in that process human oversight was replaced by automated approval. She learned how accounts were flagged, and more importantly, what the conditions were that prevented accounts from being flagged at all. She mapped mentally the entire terrain of the system she worked inside, its structures, its rhythms, and its gaps, and eventually she found one, a gap, small, almost invisible, the kind that exists in large, complex systems, precisely because large, complex systems are built by humans who cannot anticipate everything. A place where a transaction, if it was the right size, structured the right way, timed against the right volume of daily activity, could pass through without triggering a single alarm. Ronnie didn't decide immediately. She sat with the knowledge for a while, the way you sit with a question you're not ready to answer. She went home. She slept. She came back the next morning and smiled at customers and processed transactions and behaved exactly as she always had. But the question was still there. Quiet, patient, waiting. What if no one noticed? One afternoon, the branch was busy, the system was processing thousands of transactions, and Ronnie made a small adjustment to an account. Not her account, a dormant account, one of the inactive ones that still existed in the system but hadn't been touched in months. She moved a small amount, small enough to be noise, small enough to look like a rounding error, a processing fee, a decimal point in a sea of decimal points. Then she waited. An hour passed, then 2. She finished her shift, closed her station, said goodbye to her colleagues, and drove home. No call, no email, no investigator appearing at her door in the morning. The system had not noticed. Ronnie sat in her car, in her driveway, and stared at her steering wheel for a long time. Then she went back inside and tried again. This is the moment in these stories that people always want to understand. The second time, because the first time can almost be explained as curiosity, a test, almost academic, to see if the gap was real. But the second time is a choice, conscious, deliberate, made with full knowledge of what the first time proved. Ronnie made that choice, and then she made it again. Each time the amount grew, not dramatically, not greedily, but with the same measured, careful patience that defined everything else she did. She wasn't reckless, she was systematic. She understood intuitively that the thing most likely to expose her was not the size of any single transaction, but the pattern of many. So she varied the amounts, she varied the timing, she spread the activity across different accounts, different days, different points in the processing cycle where volume was highest and individual transactions were hardest to isolate. She was, in every sense of the word, professional about it. Within a few months, thousands of dollars had moved, and still the system was silent. Comment below right now, because we want to know what you're thinking at this point in the story, because what comes next is where everything changes. Here is what Ronnie understood that most people don't, until it's too late. Money, once it starts changing your life, does not stay theoretical. It becomes physical, real. It becomes the holiday you take, the car you upgrade, the apartment you move into, the clothes hanging in your wardrobe that weren't there before. And those things are visible in a way that numbers on a screen are not. The people around Ronnie started to notice something they couldn't quite name. She seemed different. Not dramatically. Ronnie was too controlled for anything dramatic. But there was a quality to her life that hadn't been there before. A quieter confidence, a looseness about money in small conversations, the way she picked up coffee for the team without hesitating, the way she mentioned a weekend away in passing without any of the qualifying language that people who are watching their budget always use. Nobody said anything. Nobody asked directly. Because Ronnie was Ronnie, trusted, established. The woman who had been here longer than most and had never given anyone a single reason for concern. But money is not the only thing that leaves a trail. Behavior does too. And inside the bank's back office, in a department that most people on the floor rarely interacted with, someone was running a routine internal audit. Not targeting Ronnie, not targeting anyone specifically. Just doing what compliance departments do. Pulling transaction data, running it against expected parameters, looking for anything that sat slightly outside the range of normal. Most of what they found was exactly what they expected to find. Ordinary irregularities, system artifacts, the mundane imperfections of a high-volume operation. But one thread, when they pulled it, didn't behave like the others. It was small. Individually, each data point was nearly invisible. But the auditor looking at it had been doing this job for 11 years. She had seen the noise that legitimate transactions make. She knew what random looked like. And this was not random. Random is messy. Random spreads unevenly. Random clusters in ways that reflect the genuine unpredictability of human behavior. This was too clean, too even, too consistent in its variation, which is itself a pattern if you know what you're looking for. Deliberate variation has a signature, and this auditor had seen that signature before. She printed the report, made a note, and sent it upstairs. 2 floors above the branch where Ronnie was greeting her first customer of the morning, a meeting was being called, quietly, without announcement. The kind of meeting that doesn't appear on any shared calendar. Ronnie had no idea. She smiled at the customer across her counter, asked how she could help, began processing the transaction with the same calm, unhurried precision that had made her the most trusted teller in the building for 7 consecutive years. And somewhere above her, the investigation began. This is where most people think the story is about greed, about a person who wanted too much and took it. But Ronnie's story is more complicated than that. Because the question that the investigators upstairs were about to spend months trying to answer wasn't just how she did it, it was why someone this good at their job, this trusted, this capable, this genuinely skilled, decided that the system she had mastered was something to be taken from rather than built within. That question doesn't have a clean answer, but it has a true one, and the truth, when it finally came out, surprised almost everyone who thought they knew her. The perfect employee had been running a perfect operation, right up until the moment the one thing she couldn't control, someone else's patience, finally caught up with her. If this story has you locked in, smash that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications because part 2 is where the investigation goes inside the confrontation.